would be aimed to imitate their dark idols. Now the political seems to be making ugly reappearances in America. There may be more men. They are usually men, stewing in the shadows, waiting for their opportunity. Hasan Piker, the leftist streamer who was set to debate Charlie Kirk later this month, reacted with great sadness and horror to the of his right-wing rival. All right, we're gonna watch we're gonna read the Politico article that took place that took place last night, where Adam Wren interviewed me about this instead of a 12-minute hate talk, because I think this was a decent summarization of how I felt at the time. Okay, I'm so sorry that we're talking under these circumstances, but I want to talk to you about Charlie Kirk's and your first reaction. It was pure horror. I had a couple people say while we were streaming that there was a guy on Twitter being like, Charlie Kirk just got on the neck at the event I'm at, and I was like, there's no way. I investigated a little bit further. I knew these kinds of events are filmed by many different points of view because there's lots of people. Charlie Kirk's whole team is there. They're filming. I was like, there's no way this is happening and no one knows about it or no one is showing footage. When breaking news stories normally unfold when I'm live, especially if it's like a thing, there's a lot of misinformation that gets thrown around. So I usually will wait for official confirmation, whether it's a journalist or whether it's the police coming out and releasing a statement or whatever. But in this circumstance, I knew that there were a lot of cameras that would be at an event such as this one. So I just started with my community scouring the internet, very quickly arrived at a couple different live streams that showed a bunch of people running around, one being fired. There was one other video that was filmed from above that showed the moment of impact, but not too much else. But it was very clear that a shoot had taken place and he'd been on the neck. And then I saw the actual close-up footage of it, and it was truly horrifying. I think it's interesting because I cover all these atrocities unfolding in Gaza all the time, every day, and there are so many. And as a part of my profession, I see a lot of horrible images in general throughout global conflict. I think seeing someone who I know, not someone I'm fond of, but still someone that I've known for years, someone that I've debated before, someone that I was supposed to be debating in 2 weeks, someone who I guess is in the same field as myself, someone who does basically what I do, but on the right, that is the one fear that's always in the back of your mind when you engage in any sort of political advocacy when you do these events. As a recipient of millions of threats at this point over the years, watching that unfold in real time was devastating. Are you afraid now for the same kind of events that you do in the future? I've been thinking about that quite a bit. I don't know. I think right now I'm just going to wait out the environment. I'm just going to wait for the temperature to lower a little bit, but I'll probably go back to it. As a part of what I do, I also go to protests. I get shot by cops. I'm constantly in these uncertain environments. While it feels like there's an air of vengeance right now with a lot of people immediately being like, well, we got to go and kill people, even naming myself and saying we're going to go on in retaliation. There are a lot of people who are just very angry and frustrated and want to redirect it towards those who they believe are responsible for this. I've never advocated for such a thing and never would. I would put myself in the crosshairs if that was the case, right? I was supposed to be sitting next to this guy 2 weeks from now at a public event. I'll probably just wait it out. But at a certain point, you can't let fear dictate your life. And that's been my modus operandi in spite of all the threats that I've received for many, many years at this point. It's just unfortunately part of the process. It shouldn't be. So you've already seen the threats as Charlie's. Yeah, I mean, yeah, but I received threats even before this all the time, nonstop. Like I said, it's almost seen as a part of the industry. What does it say about our nation that you're already receiving assassination threats and that Charlie was assassinated? I'm skeptical that we can come back from the precipice here. Like I said, it's a little different when you watch someone get assassinated. But unfortunately, I think political violence become more of a forefront in our discourse, in our generation's discourse, more so than ever before. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I have recency bias, but I don't remember any point in the past decade of my career where it was this transparent. It was this out there. It was this celebrated to this degree. And why do you think this is? I mean, that one is easy. This is something I talked about in the aftermath of Brian Thompson's murder as well, allegedly at the hands of Luigi Mangione. It's seen as a pressure valve for people. Democracy is supposed to be a pressure valve. So when democratic institutions are not working to meet the demands of the overall population, there's a lot of discontent. And then I think people find themselves in the throes of desperation, find themselves so angry that they can't deal with it, that they end up engaging in decentralized violence such as this. And I think that's where a lot of these instances of political violence and instability come from. What do you think it said about Charlie Kirk that he thought debate was one of the ways to release that pressure valve? I don't think he was ever debating people for the purpose of finding the truth or from a position of intellectual curiosity. I think a lot of people say that. Debates are only productive in the sense that it can test your opinions against your interlocutor's opinions, and it's good. It's galvanizing. I've always said that 40% of the audience on either side have already made up their minds, and they're not going to change. But then there's 20% in the margins that could swing in either direction, and it's for that 20% in the middle that you entertain the intellectual sparring. For Charlie, I think the format was more so just to humiliate his ideological opponents. And he was very successful at doing propaganda of this sort by going to college campuses and listening to what people had to say and then giving them the right-wing talking points on the matter, getting a couple dunks in the process. That's a big part of debate culture. Having said that, it still can be productive. There are still people who can have their minds change in the process where they go, wow, my worldview that I took for granted is maybe seemingly not so smart. There's some productivity that you can derive out of debates, which is why I was entertaining doing it with Charlie. You mentioned Luigi Mangione. Do you think we're going to see more of this kind of political from the future? I think if left unaddressed, a lot of these societal wounds are not going to heal. They're only going to worsen. So unfortunately, the future does seem kind of bleak in that regard. We need structural solutions to these systemic problems. It does feel like there's this political football, this back and forth about culture war narratives, culture war issues, demonization of the political opposition, rather than seeking to address these problems. At first, it might come across as just simply unproductive, or maybe productive if your goal is to change the discourse away from seeking out constructive answers to the issues that people are facing, but unproductive in the long run. Because, like I said, if left unaddressed, people become increasingly more resentful. And in that volatility, they do dangerous things. This is me and Charlie Kirk at Politicon. Tell me about your decision to debate Charlie, who the invitation came from, how you decided why you thought it was important. It was Dartmouth, I believe. They reached out to my team. I said I would do it. Charlie Kirk is a conservative firebrand who has seen a lot more real organic growth, especially with his TikToks in the last couple of years leading up to the election, and certainly during the election and the aftermath of the election. He is someone who is very well connected to the administration. I don't usually shy away from debating people like that. I think it's good and maybe even productive to have this kind of back and forth discourse to show what his worldview looks like and to test it against mine. How do we heal the discourse? I don't think it's necessarily about getting together and singing Kumbaya. I don't think that's the way to solve it. There's a social contract that everyone abides by. When they consistently feel like that social contract is getting violated with regular frequency, oftentimes due to structural violence that they experience, poverty, things of that nature, the affordability crisis that people are experiencing. Housing is incredibly costly. Healthcare is incredibly costly. The only method of upward social mobility throughout history has been to get a college education. That's incredibly costly. Everything seems unaffordable. Everything seems worse than it was for the previous generation. And I think that's what we have to solve. If we don't solve that, people are going to continue growing frustrated and angry. People are resentful. People are more malleable and more susceptible to radicalization, and they're more willing to act out in a violent manner when they feel like there's no hope, there's no other option. I'm curious, what do you think about some of the response to Charlie Kirk's on Blue Sky? They're sort of making fun of it and mocking it right now. It feels like a real hellscape. I don't go on Blue Sky, so I can't speak for people on Blue Sky. But I think it's the same in some ways to the Luigi Mangione situation. I think the reception to that was rather positive. It was shocking for a lot of people, myself included. And I think the reason for that is because we've just become more vicious. I know this from my own personal experiences as well. I know that if I were to be assassinated in a similar fashion, the right would erupt in joy, probably even more loudly than what some liberals may be experiencing. I think that's just how it is now. We are very polarized, and in some ways that polarization is understandable. In many other ways, I think the rhetoric that came from Charlie was understandably seen by many people as being inherently violent. A couple that quickly come to my mind is, even in the aftermath of school shootings that takes place in the United States of America, far too frequently, Charlie Kirk has said things that I think a lot of people have been frustrated by, saying empathy is a weakness and that we shouldn't be guided by empathy in the aftermath of these horrifying mass shootings, or things like gun is an unfortunate byproduct of having the freedoms of the Second Amendment. I think when people see that, they fight fire with fire, if you will, in their minds. They think it's fine. A big part of that is we have also become desensitized, utterly desensitized in general, both as a byproduct of our foreign policy around the globe, but also because of how violent America has become. I mean, this was the 46th school shooting that took place this year, the shooting of Charlie Kirk. And while that was happening in Colorado, there was another school shooting that took place an hour after Charlie Kirk was shot. That's not normal. After a certain point, people only see so much of this and they go, I don't really care about this. And I think that's where we're at. Obviously, I try to maintain my humanity and I try to urge others to do the same, but I do understand, even if I myself don't partake in it, where this resentment comes from. How do you maintain your humanity, twitching and then absorbing images like the ones you saw today and just being an increasingly digital world? My family, my friends, and going out in public, I think, is the perfect antidote to the vicious nature of the internet. People become a lot more cruel under the guise of anonymity. There's a cliche, right? Oh, you wouldn't say that to my face, or you're a keyboard warrior. And in some respects, that is true. I feel like a lot of people are far less vicious when they get to see the other person, when they get to be around the other person. And recently, before the internet, before the technological availabilities, that was the overwhelming majority of our interpersonal relationships. It was always in person. It was always face to face. And I think we've lost that. And that's how I try to keep myself as grounded as possible, which is ironic, of course, since political such as this one also makes it harder for me to go out in public. But that's why I said I can't let fear dictate my life. Why do you think Charlie resonated so much with Gen Zers? It's something that I think about quite a bit. I think there was a lot of discontent towards Joe Biden and his policies, or at least a lack of movement in a positive direction in this country. And for a lot of Gen Zers, they didn't experience the first Trump presidency. They were too young to fully comprehend it. And I think their adolescence was, to a certain degree, taken away by lockdowns during COVID. And they saw that as the left's invention, even though they happened under Trump as well as Biden. And it wasn't as rigid as people remember it. But regardless, I think they just saw that lack of economic hope, lack of job opportunities, the notion that they'll never be able to own a home or retire at a reasonable age, becoming a reality for them in real time. I think that was poisonous for the collective consciousness of Gen Z. And they attributed a lot of the existing administration, a lot of that to the existing administration for understandable reasons. They haven't been around for too long, right? They haven't seen that both Republicans and Democrats oftentimes contribute to the same pain and lack of movement in the appropriate direction. So they thought the same thing that people thought in 2016. They thought, let's give Trump, the institutions clearly are not working for us. Let's put a hatchet through the middle of these institutions. Let's destroy and rebuild them anew. Though the Gen Z opinion on Donald Trump has swung dramatically in the opposite direction again, I think clear. What's the best case scenario where we go from here as a society after Charlie's death? And what is the worst case? Best case is reasonable, comprehensive gun reform in the direction of safety. That sounds insane. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. But worst case is what I'm seeing on Twitter. More and more of Twitter becoming real life, where people are getting increasingly more belligerent, increasingly more angry. There's eventually going to have to be a boiling point, right? There has to be a point where all that anger and frustration mounts. And in the absence of any sort of pressure valve to release that anger, I think people will look for different targets that they have designed as the reason for why they feel the way they do. It could be a litany of different marginalized populations, black and brown people, undocumented migrants, trans people, the left, broadly, liberals, broadly. I fear that this is the worst case scenario. People in this decentralized way seeking out vengeance, seeking out some distorted sense of justice in their own minds. And then I think of the political persecution as well. I mean, Trump just came out and released a video in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's assassination where he said, we're going to go after the left. We're going to go after everyone that's demonized the right, while also simultaneously saying, we're going to do this in the spirit of free speech, which is interesting because I feel like he's spelling out a clear-cut violation of the constitutional protections afforded to every American. I fear that this is the worst future possible. Political repercussions, political persecution on the systemic side against political dissidents and enemies of the state, and decentralized acts of violence on the individual side. That's what I said. I am gonna watch the press conference in 20 minutes when it comes out. Now the question that I have is like, if I can do this off the cuff in an interview after talking for 10 hours that day, okay, how the fuck can't Ezra Klein put together a couple words that actually reflect accurately on what is to come? You were mentioned on Barkin's New York Mag piece on political violence by Ross Barkin. Kirk, for all his dynamism and influence, was never a force on the scale of Martin Luther King Jr. or Malcolm X, and since he was not an American president, merely the appendage of one, he will be no more than a historical footnote half a century from now. But Americans of the past decades, if coming of age in a far more violent and terrorized eras, did not have to reckon with such blood-drenched visual spectacle as the videos of Kirk shooting that have circulated widely on social media. Technology did not permit them, minutes after the deed, to consume all of it in full, to drown in unmediated horror. Imaginations or grainy photographs and film had to suffice. JFK's brains were blown out in the Zapruder film, but it was not broadcast publicly until 1975, 12 years after Lee Harvey Oswald aimed and fired in Dallas. And even then, it was an 8mm film shot with a Bell & Howell home movie camera. Hasan, as a 20-year-old Gen Z, I think what you said about why Charlie was so magnetic to us was entirely accurate. I'm a leftist myself, but watching my 15-year-old brother go through the same thing. And as a current college student, even in the medical field, I don't feel confident that I'm going to be able to afford a home or have a life. It was very well put, as always. Kudos to you. You got it. Is it like very hard for new immigrants to come to America now? Yes, dude. 100 P. Kirk's death was everywhere all at once. What is this? Home invasion. This doesn't mean, however, the violence is going to stop, or at the very end, or at the very minimum, this sort of targeted violence that is aimed at those who hold power or representative of an elite that must be in the febrile and diseased mind of the killer brought to justice. As assassination attempts surge anew, the mass shooting as a reality of American life begins to fade. There are still such shootings, as seen at Minnesota Catholic Church last month, but they were, to a disconcerting degree, far more common in the 2010s and early 2020s. All one needs to do is recite the place names: Sandy Hook, Aurora, Isla Vista, Charleston, Las Vegas, Parkland, and Uvalde. There have been so many that an American can begin to conflate them and the killers themselves over time, lose notoriety. Columbine in 1999 inaugurated this heinous era, and there was a long, dark period when alienated young men could dream of the infamy bestowed upon Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. Other mass murders like James Holmes, Adam Lanza, and Elliot Rodger, best remembered for his incel manifesto, became for a brief period. Pop culture figures in the media wrestled with its role in publicizing the identities of these men and the sinister screeds they left behind. Mass shootings proliferated with the wide availability of firearms, assault rifles in particular, and the realization on the part of the killers that slaughtering unarmed people who are not famous is far less challenging than plotting the death of an American president. Ronald Reagan was wounded and not killed. Gerald Ford survived 2 assassination attempts within 17 days in 1975. The mimetic theory of desire, pioneered by French historian, philosopher René Girard, posits that humans look to others rather than to themselves to determine what it is they want to do. They long for what others long for and sculpt themselves accordingly. Violence itself may follow a similar current. One mass shooting begets another, which begets another. Would-be killers aim to imitate their dark idols. Now the political assassination seems to be making ugly reappearances in America. There may be more men. They are usually men, stewing in the shadows, waiting for their opportunity. Hasan Piker, the leftist streamer who was set to debate Charlie Kirk later this month, reacted with great sadness and horror to the assassination of his right-wing rival, even as many of his own followers did not feel much sympathy for the conservative who had vilified the LGBTQ plus community, the immigrant community, and many other marginalized groups. The reverberations of people seeking out vengeance in the aftermath of this violent, abhorrent incident is going to be genuinely worrisome, Piker said. He understood right away that he might be a target too. These are times in which we now live. Seeing sections of Ezra Klein piece that has me feeling completely insane. I genuinely cannot comprehend, not even a little bit, what liberals think is going on. Status quo maintenance, especially of late, requires an endless string of feigned delusions, retcons, and amnesia. I am not being flippant when I say it's a genuine skill, and like any artisan craft, can be very well compensated when it is in demand, as it's now more than ever. Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think that's precisely what's going on. For the likes of Ezra Klein and many other liberal thinkers, they refuse to reckon with the reality that is imminent. They are getting paid handsomely to dull the masses into submission, to make them feel as though fascism isn't here. Okay? Genuine question, have you received direct threats since yesterday? Are you joking? Yes. Sometimes I forget that, like, that's not a normal part of the political process. So whenever I joke about that kind of stuff happening all the time, it comes across as like shocking to people. Yes. Damn, your TikTok audio is being used to spread awareness.
Before people say, wear a bulletproof vest. Again, he got shot in the neck. A bulletproof vest would not have saved Charlie Kirk, okay? Security did not save Charlie Kirk. The only thing that could have potentially saved Charlie Kirk from getting shot in the neck was if our administrations, prior to this one and this one as well, actually had reasonable gun control as a policy provision in the immediate aftermath of, I don't know, 100 other school shootings that took place.
That's crazy that people are lip syncing that. What was on? You look different? Yeah. There's another take on Klein's op-ed. The leftists are not mad at Ezra Klein for speaking out against the killing of Charlie Kirk. We're mad at the specific claim that a man who spewed hate for a living was practicing politics the right way. Most of us abhor both his killing and everything he stood for. Speaking only for myself, I think it's good when people across the aisle condemn the killing and offer sympathy to his family. And silly to be mad at Zoran for doing so. But there's no reason to praise a man who ever extended that basic humanity to anyone outside. It's so unbelievably fucking stupid that we have to pretend, even for a minute, that the far right in America isn't openly fantasizing about killing us every single day. It's like the role reversal that liberals engage in. You know how I said, and we'll keep saying over and over again, that like modern conservatism is about inventing a reality to get mad at, and then constantly getting mad at that reality that you invented to get mad at. Like, liberalism is almost the opposite side of the coin, where there are monsters, okay? You're stuck in a room with bloodthirsty monsters in this hypothetical scenario, okay? They want to kill you. They don't hide that they want to kill you. They're salivating. They're talking about the bloodlust that they have. And the liberal in the room is just saying, no, it's fine. It's fine. It's the room is dark. You're just imagining things. Everything is going to be all right. Let's just keep it chill. I mean, look, there's obviously differences in opinion. Those guys want to eat us. We don't want to be eaten. But I think there's room for compromise here. There's room for bipartisan compromise. Maybe we can get half of the leftists to be eaten in the room, and then everyone will be fine. Their appetite will be satiated. They'll be okay. Let's just dialogue. And that is becoming increasingly just as psychotic as the fucking reactionary worldview that is built on fantasy, pure hallucinations of like being in a permanent state of victimhood. At what point will liberals turn around and go, okay, maybe fucking things are not fine, right? Because for a lot of people, a lot of normal people, they look at what's going on and they go, things are not fine. But when you look to the liberals in positions of power, whether it be the Democratic Party or whether it be the writers, the people like Ezra Klein, the thinkers, they just keep saying, no, it's just, everything's okay. Everything's okay. Everything's gonna be okay. Civility must continue. They are going to civility themselves to the fucking gallows at this point. They're going to be like, there's going to be a fucking rope around the necks of prominent liberals, and they're going to look around and go, well, at least the procedural hurdles have been cleared, and the process is actually still stable. The institutions remain. The institutions remain. Even if it's... There was one other piece, but Jasper Nathaniel says, Klein's last op-ed warned, this is not just how authoritarianism happens. This is authoritarianism happening. 4 days later, he cast Trump's most devoted disciple as a paragon of democratic politics. Insane. Yeah, that's crazy. And I don't know if these guys are doing it deliberately. I don't know if they're doing it out of a fear, out of like a real discernible fear of political persecution or something. They're using their institutional prominence to like whitewash, launder the reputation of Trump and Trumpism in general. But it's just... I don't know. I can't understand it. Maybe a good test is, would I have said these things about Charlie Kirk when he was alive? If not, then perhaps you are under the mistaken impression that being murdered ennobles you. Yep. And for the record, liberals do believe that. They do. Once you're dead, you have to be remembered as a good guy, no matter what. Hamas Piker has no shame. Okay, got it. The ultimate fear, political commentator says after Charlie Kirk's shooting, political influencers who debated Kirk were visibly shaken as news spread. Commentators across the political spectrum were shaken up in the immediate aftermath of the fatal shooting of right-wing influencer Charlie Kirk at Utah University campus. This is the ultimate fear for a political commentator. This is it. This is the thing that you don't want happening. This is the thing that you never want happening. Hasan Piker, popular socialist streamer known for his Gaza war advocacy. What does that even mean? Gaza war advocacy.